I'd like to introduce you to a very good friend of mine, Shannon Brundrett. She's a yoga teacher like none other that I have ever met. She teaches outdoors in the summer and leads clients on nurture in nature events. It's this beautiful blend of fitness and meditation and reflection. But that's not all she teaches. She teaches stand-up paddleboard, and this is where our friendship really grew, is on our boards. Shannon teaches yoga on the water on a paddleboard. It's called Sup Yoga. And if you try it like even just once, it will level up your flatland regular mat yoga. I can tell you that I'm completely hooked on this. It's completely changed my practice, and like it makes me a little sad to practice inside sometimes. The thing is that's again not all that Shannon does. She hosts meditation circles and full moon circles. She has a personal spiritual practice that, like my own, is grounded in nature, and she's just really cool. So I've invited her to be my first guest today on the Witching Half Hour or so. Without any further ado, I'd like you to meet my friend Shannon. Hi.
Aw, thanks, Jodianne. That's so amazing. Aw, that's so sweet. I'm blushing. I'm like literally turning red here. That's
That's
awesome.
so cute.
I love it. Wow, I'm like listening to you and I'm like, wow, I do all those things.
You do. Is there anything I missed? Because you do a lot of stuff.
No, I think that's it. Yeah, it all started with yoga, and here I am, and I'm just so grateful for the outdoors and how much it just keeps giving me, like so much gratitude for nature, outdoors, being in the forest, being on the water. Yeah, it's amazing, as you know.
Yeah. Well, and right now we're recording this in the end of November. It'll probably come out in December, maybe early January. So it's easy to get outdoors in the summer. So what do you do for that in the winter? Cause we're outside a lot in the summer.
Well, honestly, you need to have the right gear. So today I went for a hike. If you're living in BC, you've known we've had these atmospheric rivers, which is the first time I've ever heard of this. Okay, so these rivers pouring out from our sky. And today I went for a hike. So my boots are waterproof, my jacket's waterproof, I've got a hat on, and then I keep a change of clothes in the cars. And I just make sure I have a nice long shower or bath when I get home. But the beauty of being outside on a day like today when it's raining, which got me hooked on going outdoors to begin with, was that it got me away from the hustle and bustle, the busyness of life, not seeing very many people out on the trail, like nobody, except for, near the end, 2 people on the main trail on the way back. And that to me is just bliss. Like, it's just amazing. It gets me out of my head. It gets me out of the noise of the responsibilities of life. And I can just be in awe and wonder looking at plants and look at mushrooms and look at the way the rain is like sitting on or splashing on the plants, or all of the rivers that, well, they're not rivers. They were like trails that turned into little creeks because there's so much water.
It's nuts. I've been running this week, and then I was out last week right after the big atmospheric river. And it amazes me always how much water can come into the lower mainland and go through the lower mainland. Like all these trails, all these like little baby creeks show up out of nowhere, and like nature just adjusts to whatever's happening.
Totally. So yeah, I'm just, for me, I love it.
And then now a lot of times when you're out in nature, you're facilitating and you're teaching. So what do you notice when you're the teacher? How does being within a natural setting affect your students? compared to when you're in a yoga studio? Because I know you do both things.
There's so many different elements to being outside. So one is that you don't have a flat, beautifully flat surface to put your yoga mat on. Mm-hmm. A bit bumpy and lumpy, and you might, need to find a smoother spot. You might get on an area with some ants that you need to move your mat away from or whatever. So you get a bumpy surface. So it does require you to adapt and adjust. It's just so peaceful, especially at the end of practice when we have the Shavasana. And you know this from being out in the water. Yeah. The stillness and the quiet and the sound of birds or the wind or whatever it is, there's just a different connection that can happen than in a inside space.
Well, and we do. I practice your classes, and I swear you've wrecked me for regular yoga. I practice outside in my yard all the time in the summer, and there is something almost transcendent when you are in a Shavasana outside. It really connects you differently, I think, to your breath.
Yeah. And for me, my body, like I almost feel as if I'm one with the earth underneath me. I'm one with just kind of everything. Like there's almost like this feeling of, there's no longer a feeling of separation, that I'm this and this is the floor and this is the walls. You just feel a part of the whole.
I find that too when we're on the water with the group of women we go with, the kind of communal bonding. I don't know if that's a thing, like a real word, but the kind of camaraderie or friendships that grow out of it. It just seems like a much more tighter knit little unit than when you're going in and out of a studio. And there's nothing wrong with a studio. Like I practiced in a studio for a long time, but we're a spiritual podcast. And I find that for me, that really changed the spiritual aspect of yoga. Here we're outside and how many times have we had an eagle swoop across our class or
a heron or an osprey or
that we see ospreys. I see them only when I'm on the water with you guys. I don't typically see them anywhere else.
It's so cool. And I was actually thinking about the nurture nature events that I do, the paddleboarding trips in yoga. There's such a curiosity that comes from everybody. There's a lightness or a playfulness. And even for myself, I when I'm outside, I'm like a little kid, right? I got that childlike wonder. I'm like, ooh, look at this. Ooh, look at this. And I feel that me being like that is also very infectious to other people. And so that energy of being excited to be out there and to be like, oh, look at the ripple of the water for this, or, just these little things that as we go through our day-to-day world inside, we don't know, we just pass by all these things all the time without noticing them. And when I'm outside, well, I do. Maybe not I do. But when I'm outside, it's like I notice every little thing. Just like there's a heightened awareness and there's an excitement. And I feel like when somebody's truly excited about something, it just radiates out to everybody else who gets excited about it too. So.
So this is kind of cool. We've been chatting about yoga. Our topic today that I'll probably say in the intro at the very beginning of the podcast. I don't know. We're supposed to be talking about grounding and breath work. But I think this really fits because without saying it out loud, we are saying how grounded we feel when we are in nature. Because you even said much more connected to your body. And one of my questions, it's funny. One of my questions is, how do you reground yourself as you go through your day? And I think you've already answered that. You get out into nature and that whole awareness of all these little things that when you're in the other kind of modes and spaces in your day, what I kind of hear is that you're not, how do I say that? That when you're in nature, you're much more present. And the things that you maybe not notice in the hustle and bustle, you get to slow down when you're in a natural space.
100%. And, I was thinking about this too. How do I, if I can't get outside, like there's oftentimes where people would say, or they might be listening to this, or I'm going to even say there's days when I feel like I haven't been outside at all today. This time of year, it's dark. If I'm going to work all day and then I get there and it's dark and I leave and it's dark, I might have some moments outside where I might slow down and notice, but I'm not spending a chunk of time outside. And in those times, like if I'm sitting at my desk or maybe I'm driving somewhere and I'm stopped at a light, I can easily pause, take a couple full breaths, just become aware of my body, aware of my breathing, and just aware of my surroundings. How many times have you been driving? You're like, oh, how did I get from A to B? Like my head was like so busy. It's like, woo, like there's so many thoughts going on. When I get into that point, sometimes I notice, sometimes I don't, but there's often times where I'm just like, okay, slow down, take a deep breath, and then just settle. And it can be so simple, especially if you're sitting at a stoplight for a minute. You could take 3 or 4 breaths, no problem, and just slow things down. I'm using driving as an example because I notice that when I'm too much in my head or I'm just not grounded, it shows up when I'm driving. I get really kind of hostile on the road.
I don't think you're the only one. I do. I get a bit aggro myself. I get very impatient. I'm like, why are you driving the speed limit? It's quite terrible. I find when I'm driving, it's the moon. And because of where we live, a lot of places we go like in and around, because Shannon and I actually live within walking distance of each other. So we do a lot of hiking and walking together. When I go over the overpass, there's lots of places where you can clearly see Mount Baker. Right? Because we are in the lower mainland. So we look out across and you can see Mount Baker. And I find when I'm in those kind of really sticky, yucky places behind the wheel, if I catch a glimpse of the moon or a sunset or the way the light hits Goldnear's Mountain at dusk, and they light up all pink, it completely transforms what's happening in my brain.
I'm with you. I 100% do the exact same thing. So if I can't be out in it, then I'm going to take in those views. When I'm driving along the Loeid Highway, I'll even take a quick glance down the river, just what the river's looking like. Or if I'm going over one of the bigger bridges, I look off into the mountains just to reconnect, even though I'm not out there.
Grounding work and breath work for me go hand in hand. Like I can't separate them, right? Like I use breath to ground most of the time.
Yeah.
To come back to my body, even when it's not controlling the breath, even when it's just listening to my breath, paying attention to my breath, wondering what it's doing. It brings me out of whatever is happening and regrounds.
Yeah, because there's an awareness we have with our bodies. So proprioception, I believe is the word. And when we have a conscious breath, there's, at least for me, it brings me out of my mind. It brings me back into like this felt sense in my body. It also helps me to connect to sort of a universal energy, whether that's, Mother Earth or, spirit above. There's just something that feels more whole, as opposed to when I'm bustling around and not thinking about my breath and I'm shallow breathing. And then as soon as, like, I'm all over, I'm not really here. I'm not present. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, I might even make a sound when I'm breathing out, like a sigh or like a, or some like a, just it's like a release of energy. And then it's right back to the present moment. And when I do that, I kind of think of like that central channel, right? So that connection from the base of my spine, like that whole central channel, it just brings me right back, right here.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. With the breath, what I've come to understand, and this taken me many, many years of teaching yoga to understand this, is that some people get really triggered from breathing, or from breath work, or from breathing deeply. In a yoga practice or a yoga class, you might hear, take some deep breaths in or slow your breath down or count as you're breathing. For some people, that might be challenging, or it might create more anxiety, or it might create panic. And for some people, it creates an ease and a comfort. So I don't always feel like there's a one solution, and I'm not an expert in breath work by any means. But our breath is our life force. It keeps us alive. Shallow breathing keeps us contracted and constricted. When I think of contraction or constriction, I think of like fear or scared. And when I think of a fuller breath, I just think of expansion and radiating energy, or just being open to receive, open to give and receive, and get back to that reciprocity. But the in-breath and the out-breath go together, even though they're different. They work together. And you can't have just in-breaths.
No.
You can't just have out-breaths.
No.
So there's definitely reciprocity happening with our breath. And I always used to like hearing people talk about this pause at the top of the in-breath and the pause at the bottom of the exhale. That's so very subtle. And it's just that moment of, there's just like nothing.
That's my favorite moment when I do meditation or shavasana type stuff, is that pause. It's not so much at the top. I tend to pause longer at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And then, when I'm nice and relaxed, the in-breath just comes in at this very natural moment. It's almost like your lungs just, I don't know, it's just weird. I'm going to get all weird, but it's almost like your lungs just allow breath to come in.
That's right.
Like effortlessly, like you're not even inhaling. It's like your body just goes, and now let's have some oxygen. And it just flows in so beautifully.
I feel like it's so important to have this awareness. Like, how many people walk around not aware of their breath? I mean, I walk around most of the time not aware of my breath, but that never even think about breathing or slowing their breath down or consciously drawing in a deep breath. Or maybe, how many times people are sighing or they're because they're frustrated or whatever, but not realizing that their breath is naturally trying to release that kind of energy.
Yeah, I know in my walking around the world, I do see that when people, they don't realize they'll be sighing or puffing out or just, and they don't even consciously realize that their body is trying to tell them to slow down or to stop or to recenter. It's one of the reasons I wanted to start my first kind of interview with grounding, because I think that that's where everything starts. And whether it's a meditation practice, whether it's a magic practice, whether it's energy work, whatever it is, it starts with the idea of being grounded.
100%. And you know that because you do that work, and you do Reiki and I do Reiki, and that's like the first thing as any practitioner would do, even for yoga. As a yoga teacher, I'm just going to say the reason we do breath work at the beginning of class most of the time is so that I can get grounded as well as everyone else get grounded, so that I can be present and I can teach a class that I'm not just jumping into without feeling like I'm fully there. And for me anyways, anytime I would show up to, when I was out there teaching in the world, yoga studios or wherever, I like to give myself lots of time. I'd show up early, I'd get everything set up. For me, that's part of that practice of being present and showing up and being grounded. And it's the same thing in a Reiki session or leading a group for any kind of thing. If I'm not grounded, the reflection back is going to be the group is also probably not grounded, right?
Yeah. No, I do actually preparation work days before, sometimes it's pretty major depending on what kind of group I'm leading. I will start doing thought work and energy work, before, like days before. Like, what am I going to do? Where am I going to lead this? And I have to be grounded to lead a group. Because a lot of people, I think, come into a group sometimes without a great personal practice, and they may have things going on and they're not grounded. And as the leader of that group, I feel personally responsible to make sure that I can have a good anchor set up. I'll even throw grounding cords in a circle I'm leading that are just randomly there if someone doesn't have one of their own. Do you know what I mean? Like, just like to make sure that the space itself is grounded, that the circle itself is grounded.
100%. 100%. As practitioners that are leading groups in energy work, and I'm going to throw yoga in that mix because that's what I believe it is. That's really key. And I don't know if you've shown up to an event or a class where I have personally shown up and felt like, whoa, what's going on here? And maybe the teacher's not grounded there, or maybe there's something else happening. But it is important for us as leaders of groups to have our own regular practice.
Well, and I think I'm kind of picky with whose yoga classes I will go to. Because for me, it needs to have that spiritual aspect to it.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the beauty of yoga is there's so many different practices out there perhaps now that it's amazing. And even how many people came to yoga on the paddleboard or sup yoga or paddleboard yoga, whatever you want to call it, that hadn't actually or don't practice yoga on land.
Isn't that wild when that happens?
It's unbelievable. There's been so many people and they love it. And I feel like for a lot of people that haven't tried it, there's this misconception that they're just going to be falling in all the time. And you know that that's not the case.
No, we don't. We do fall in sometimes.
Sometimes we playfully jump in.
I think we jump in more than we fall in.
We 100% jump in to go swimming way more than we ever fall in.
You know what I find interesting is whenever we're out there and we're trying a new, more complex pose, or we're doing more of a flow, because we've got a group we go with quite, we come out all the time. So we've got some experience doing it on our boards, and we can do more flow right through on our boards. That's not when we're doing tricky stuff, that's not when we fall. Like, I fail in a basic warrior because probably I'm not grounded, or I'm diggling too much, or I'm just having a weird windy day or whatever. And I always find that interesting and beautifully humbling too, because here I am in a pose I'll do over and over on the board, and I have to get out of it so fast or I'm going to be in the drink.
Yeah, that's fun.
That's that playfulness we were talking about that seems to come out. There's something really, really amazing that happens when you get a group of women together on water.
Oh, I had no idea that it would be what it's been. With the women that have been coming out, especially to the sup yoga, or, there's over the years anyways, there's just this camaraderie and people trust each other, and we're all out there just, I don't know. I just think the balance of being on the board and the balance of just being with each other, it's beautiful.
There's a lot of sharing that happens on the paddle to our yoga spot and the paddle back as well. There's really deep connections that we've built with each other.
Lots of friendships.
It's neat out there too in nature, because when you're just grounded in yourself, enjoying yourself in nature, I think it's a way of, you can connect to people, to their little flame, who the flame inside them is, without any of the, what you do for a living or who you are to other people, whether you're a mother or a sister or a daughter or whatever.
Yeah.
And we're talking about feminine people because typically that's who comes out to our classes. I don't know if we've had any fellows out to our yoga classes. We have to other excursions we've done on the boards, but not to the yoga so much. Not
in a while. The first couple of years I did, or somebody would bring their friend, or somebody would bring their brother, or somebody would, a couple would sign up. But I definitely have been attracting women to my classes and events, and Like I've never put it out there that it's a women's only event, or I'm not gender biased around it. It's just, this is what has been happening. And it's beautiful.
It is. So I think maybe since we're still talking about paddling, maybe we could talk about full moon paddles, because that's a very, very magical thing that happens. And I don't know if you're going to still I know last year you weren't offering them because where we went has changed, and I don't even know if I'll keep that in the recording, but there's something pretty amazing about the full moon paddles when the water's high and the moon is out, and we would paddle into the sunset and turn around and paddle to the moonrise. And that little edge of light still peeking over from the sun as the light from the moon starts rising. It's an amazing, you can feel the energy of those two heavenly bodies, and I really think the water amplifies it. Usually have an offering to give to the water or a mandala that's placed before we head out, like there is a spiritual aspect to it. That's a wonderful thing. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Those are so beautiful events. I definitely have a lot of reverence for the moon and for the water. I mean, the oceans, the moon is just, it controls the tides but definitely at the beginning of these events, coming together as a group to create some kind of offering, whether it's a mandala form or we each have our own offerings for the water to say our blessings or prayers or whatever we want to send out. It's another way to bring everybody together, because once we're on the water, what I find with the events is it's an event where we all come together, but it's also a very reflective time for people. Mm-hmm. It was just very reflective. It was very much a time to take in the beauty of the sun setting. At the end of the day, all the colors reflected on the water and in the sky, on the clouds. And then waiting for that moon to rise. You know, there would be this moment where we would just pause, and then you could just see that peak of that little tiny sliver of that orange, big, huge moon coming up on the horizon. It's just so, like, everyone's just like, wow. And it's so powerful. And just sitting there and just watching this moon slowly show itself, I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, it's just something that's felt. I don't even know that there's English words for this feeling. And then it's dark, and then you still got this beam of light that's sort of guiding you back, and then arriving to the beach when it's completely dark out already. I don't know. There's just some magic there that if you're at all in tune with the energy of the moon being on the water, it's just like a whole nother level of connecting with the moon. Because I've seen the moon come up, from my patio or from my place many times, and it looks great, but not nearly as amazing as being on the water.
And I think there's something that happens too, because when we go out, there's an intention set. There's an intention set every time you've facilitated one of these. You set an intention. I know for myself, there's something about giving your worry to the water on the full moon. Watching the sun slip down is so much like watching the release of that. Mm-hmm. And then as the moon comes up, it's like the goddess is giving you her blessing and a piece of hope to put in your pocket on that moonbeam.
100%.
Just guide you. And then just like you say, I mean, we paddle back to the beach, and I know I have pictures of it. Maybe on the show notes, I'll put some of the pictures we've taken on the full moon paddles, where there is this cascading moonbeam across this black water, and that's our path back to the beach.
So amazing.
It's like it's lit for you by the goddess herself.
And it's just following you, like it's just part of you. Like I feel like I am completely connected with the moon. Mm-hmm. When I'm on the water. It just feels like it's just continuing to move with you. That beam of light just is staying with you. Mm. Yeah, it's very nurturing. I know I don't get that same feeling perhaps when I'm guiding a full moon event that's not on the water, but there's still there's still that connection, and there's still that energy. connected to that moon in any kind of, excuse me, in any ceremony with the moon.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's why we've been worshiping her since the beginning of time, because she's pretty amazing.
So great.
Right?
So great. Yeah.
Well, I think we've got lots of stuff here that we can make into a podcast. This is awesome. We could keep going. You and I, we could be just like, blah, blah, blah. Before we kind of wrap up, do you have anything you want to promote? I mean, we've talked about a lot of the stuff you do, but if you want to promote anything, you can shamelessly promote right now. And I can put any link you want in the show notes.
Coming in the new year, I'm going to be doing some of the Nurture and Nature half-day retreats and perhaps some full-day retreats. But the Nurture and Nature half-day retreats, I'm going to be doing a winter series. So normally I don't start those into the spring, but I've had so many people asking for those for the winter. So those will be coming up January and February for sure.
Okay, so we'll link to those.
I do hold new moon circles at Sadhana Yoga in Port Coquitlam, and my full moon circles have been on Zoom. So we'll see. I think those will continue on for now.
So the Zoom ones, people wouldn't have to necessarily be in the Lower Mainland either. So anyone listening anywhere could Zoom in to your full moon circles.
That's right. That's right.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for being my first interview. This was fun.
This was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so glad my cat didn't walk over, although he usually makes his cameo in my yoga classes online, so he's here, but he didn't come over tonight, so.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and hopefully we can get
I hope you got enough about grounding and breath work in there